Hey everybody, Bifocal here. I just wanted to let you guys know, thank you all so much for 100 subs. I honestly didn't expect that I would get this far. Thank you guys for allowing me to give you amazing, short, and long horror stories, no matter what it is. I'm always looking for comments and ways to up the ante and improve in any kind of way. So if you guys have any comments or even some good stories, feel free to let me know in the comments below. So I appreciate everything that you guys have done for me. Honestly, everyone have an amazing day. And even so, thank you again for 100 subs. I want to keep this going and see what other amazing stories that we can find. And I hope that you guys will still be here with me in the end. I'll see you guys later. Maintaining a steady pace, placing one foot in front of the other, trudging along as he'd done for the past 4 months. Sam felt the distance growing between himself and the creek. A crisp breeze came down from the mountain, and Sam took in a slow breath, smiling in at the scents of earth and pine. Minor hunger pangs frayed at the edges of the meditative vacuum in his mind, but he chose to ignore them. Almost all hikers traversing southern Washington on the Pacific Coast Trail stopped for the night for the campground at Panther Creek. They would usually unload their gear, set up camp for the night, and sit around a nice fire. Perhaps they would invite some neighboring campers to join them, campers who would not hesitate to accept. There's something about being in nature, and especially the remote outdoors, that serves so quickly to dissolve the strangeness between strangers. That same ethereal something inspires the unspoken code of the hiker. We are in this together. We look out for each other. And though we may never see one another again, we are nevertheless a kind of family. Sam gently urged his thoughts away from the campground and its temporary denizens, reorienting his focus on the climb before him. Not that he was immune to the kinship felt between hikers. In fact, he'd very much enjoyed countless communal campfires himself, since he set out from Mexico in April. However, Sam had woken up early on this particular morning, feeling especially rested and alert, and, harrying his pace throughout the day, found that he was easily the first to arrive at Panther Creek by mid-afternoon. Standing alone at the bridge that crossed the creek, a kind of restlessness that nagged at him, feeling uncharacteristically agitated, maybe even a little manic, Sam had decided to press on and hike late into the evening. Looking up at a uniform gray sky, he dropped his trekking poles and unbuckled the chest strap of his harness, setting his pack in the middle of the worn trail. He took off his boots, pulled on his thermal pants and an extra pair of socks, and stuffed his jacket into the top of his pack for easy access. The rain might come soon, but he intended to stay cool as long as possible as he ascended the steep, zigzagging trail ahead. The second he heard or felt the first drops, he would just quickly grab his jacket and maybe look for a serviceable place to send Ted up. The ascent was harder on him than he anticipated. 4 months of hiking had left Sam lean, his calves plump and solid like softballs, and his lungs operated at peak efficiency. But the air thinned as every step took him higher, and he already had set a furious pace throughout the day. Also, Sam remembered that he had foolishly neglected to eat dinner. He took a candy bar from his pocket and unwrapped it, taking a small bite. He was almost the next switchback when he was startled by a cracking sound somewhere above him. A tree broke fire at his base and toppled through the branches of the adjacent pines. He stood frozen for a moment, his jaw slack as he listened to the absolute silence that followed. His trance was broken when a stream of drool, mingled with chocolate and caramel and bits of peanut, trickled from the corner of his mouth. He chuckled at himself and wiped his chin, stepping forward once more. Soon, he was at the point of the switchback, and Sam felt a wave of elation to see that this switchback supported an apron, a small patch of level ground that he could use as an impromptu rest area. He grunted a sigh of relief as he shoved the empty wrapper into his pocket and stepped off the trail. Panting, Sam pressed his thumb and forefinger into the quick release buckle at the sternum, releasing the chest strap. That was when he heard it. A crackle of thunder. This was near him and the sound was growing. He turned to the slope above him and saw it was too late, the tree falling into him. He tried to fall backward, twisting away, and managed to take his head out of the truck's path, but it slammed down on his right shoulder. Instead, there he was, falling, and rolling down the mountain. He flew into the air, flipping madly, and when he landed, his left heel dug into the dirt he face slammed in next to it, breaking his nose. He rolled and flew again, inverted and facing the hill, but his right arm slammed into a tree trunk, spinning him like a top in the air. The world spun madly for Sam as he managed a single thought. I'm dead. Before the snapping of branches ushered him into darkness. Pain. Pain and cold. Sam awoke and immediately regretted it. He couldn't even tell what hurt at first. In his foggy headed delirium. In those first waking moments, Sam knew only that everything hurt and that he was freezing, tired, and confused. There was a rushing sound and a copper smell, and what little he could see in the darkness blurred as pinpoints of light danced over everything. Everything around him was soaked, so it must have rained at some point. But the clouds had thinned somewhat as he slept. The damp that he could see sparked in what little moonlight filtered through the branches above. He tried to take a breath, and a sharp pain in his chest made him cough, bringing him a new understanding of misery. The world spun as he struggled to breathe, struggled to keep from coughing. His ribs were broken. His lungs were punctured. His breathing shallow and quick. He decided to just take stock. He tried to lift his leg, but pain sliced across the back of it, just under his buttock. Something with pain was turned there. A wave of nausea hit him and he tried to cover his mouth, but the contents of his arm slapped against his side. His right shoulder hurt where the tree had struck him. His right arm was shattered, though a numbness saved him for whatever agony might come later. He focused on controlling his breathing, and after several minutes, the nausea passed. Even lying still, he couldn't seem to get enough breath. His back ached along its entire length, but, miraculously, his left arm and right leg were relatively functional. aside from a few minor scratches. His head throbbed, though, at all. He was so incredibly cold. His mind eventually cleared, though the headache remained, and he found he was able to turn his head slightly from the side, despite a tightness in his neck. He took in his surroundings. His phone was gone. His backpack was gone. It had flown to him during his tumble, and I was probably halfway up to the apron. However that far he was, he had no idea. His emergency satellite GPS messenger was clipped to the side of the pack, where it could do him no good. The candy wrapper was still in his left pocket, but he had missed his chance to catch the rainwater with it. He thought of the 3-liter water bladder in his pack and imagined sucking on the nozzle. Imagined the relief that even slightly rubber tasting water would provide. Sam imagined how he could be found. If he was still alive by morning, some ambitious early bird might make it to the apron, might take a break there, and maybe might look over the edge. If his pack hadn't fallen too far, this hypothetical savior might spot the pack and realize what had happened, and they could possibly help him down again in time to save him. Maybe. Might possibly. Not likely. Sam realized he would probably die here amidst pieces. He wouldn't last long enough to starve to death. That was certain. But the cold would surely get him before the dehydration. His jacket was still in his pack, so that was it. He would die of exposure. Right here. And alone. The dam diffused the smells of the area. The same scents he'd so relished throughout his trek he had lost their charm and inspired no comfort. Beyond the smells of his own blood and bloody odor, he was awash in the bouquet of the conference rainforest. Earth and pine, of course, and a slight tinge of rotting undergrowth. The wind continued to hiss through the crowns and branches of the trees, but there was a new sound under the rest. A slow, pulsating hiss came from somewhere off to his left. Shh. Anxiety crept into his chest and his heart began to pound. Sam continued to listen, trying to hold himself still. His joints stiff as his muscles cramping. But he couldn't stop the trembling. He realized the sound was getting closer, but he couldn't spot the source. Somehow along the rhythm rustle quickened. It kept getting louder, the ground moving steadily towards him. And there it was. From a distance, the creature looked like a long black sleeping bag. It was moving straight for Sam, and though 10 feet of it had come into view, it had not yet revealed its entire length. A 2-foot width splayed out to a bulbous 4 or 5 feet towards the rear. It was as black as ink, glistening, molted down along its back, like a leech. "Hey!" he cried out. "Hey, get away! Go away!" But his voice was weak, hoarse, and it lacked conviction. The creature took no notice anyway. It continued to approach, undilating towards him. Sam tried to sit up, but immediately fell back, overwhelmed by pain and exhaustion. He slapped at the thing's head, but it rose up out of reach, wavering drunkenly. Its mouth opened, revealing concentric rings of sharp teeth and multiple sets of thick fangs in the center, more akin to the mouth of a lamprey eel. Sam sobbed and tried desperately to push back at the body, but his efforts were futile. A powerful suction pulled the entirety of his head into the gaping maw. "No!" sobbed Sam. His jaw and neck exploded with sharp agony as dozens of dagger-like teeth embraced him in a powerful grip. The inner fangs seized him by the skull as the teeth released, extended, and reattached further down, around his shoulders and clavicles. Sam was suffocating as the fangs released and his head was pulled in deeper. His face was suddenly awash with a powerful bile, burning his scalp, his face, his eyes. He vomited, his sick bursting from his mouth and nose, dripping from the perforations in the mess of his neck, mingling with the creature's digestive juices. His melted scalp and eyelids, as well as the tip of his nose, sloughed away from his head as he was eaten alive. His whole body clenched in pain and fear. Sam's mind gradually dimmed to that primal simplicity reserved for a prey animal in its final moments. The dim light of his consciousness vaguely begged for the end to hasten, and, a moment later, Sam was gone. Cryptozoology has always been a minor interest of mine. I say minor because it was something I'd only enjoyed casually. A few internet articles here and there, scrolling through a couple of pages on a Tumblr blog dedicated to it, maybe watching some of those Bigfoot documentaries. You know, that kind of interest. Nothing serious. Generally, that would be pretty common for most people. Most people, however, do not live in my little town, where I suppose cryptid is how many folks here make a living. You see, I live in a small town in the UK, more specifically in the northwest of England. It's a tiny place not many people outside of the country have likely heard of, unless they've already been there for whatever reason or they have an interest in cryptids. My small town is situated by one of the many lakes that dot this part of the country, and so many bodies of water do. We have our own Loch Ness Monster. So many people claim, anyway. I'm sure many of you are skeptical of that as you are any such monster. Who can blame you? I grew up here, and I didn't buy into that. I found it interesting, but I didn't believe it. Same as I didn't believe those people who claimed aliens probed their backside, or that Bigfoot had destroyed their camp. It was something to read about and enjoy, but not something I believed. Most of my generation and that of my parents felt the same, but many of my grandparents' era clung to the belief in the monster. They stayed away from the lake unless they were in some decently sized boats or one of the many ferries that traveled the length of the lake to nearby settlements. Not us kids and teens, though, especially not in the summer. Most of the time, British summers are nothing to brag about. They're pretty warm, but usually cloudy or wet. Sometimes, however, we were blessed with a heat wave. Nothing was better than a dip in the lake during the heat of the day. During school holidays, the older kids would hang out by the lake well into the evening. The worst that would ever happen was that someone would get a cramp while swimming, and we had to get them back to shore. or someone would get their foot tangled in the lake and wait and freak out until they realized what it actually was. Nothing sinister, nothing serious. Most certainly no lake monster. One particular day, during the Easter break, where it was much too cold to spend more than 5 minutes at a time in the lake, I was spending my time climbing the many tall trees that cover the areas around all lakes. Maybe I was a bit old for tree climbing, most likely, but it had always been something I'd enjoy doing. Something about climbing as high as I could go and sitting down on a sturdy branch just looking over my surroundings was something I enjoyed. Most of the time I just watched boats going up and down the lake, people going about their business, cars passing down the country roads. Just typical stuff not worthy of merit. But this day, in spring, was different. The day itself was like any other. A chilly but sunny day in late March. I'd already taken up my temporary church in an old oak, where I'd stay for an hour or so before going off to meet friends. From where I was perched, I could see 2 young kids, maybe around 8 or 9, playing down by the shore. They weren't close to the water, just sitting in the grassy area a little ways off the bank. 2 girls. I couldn't really see what they were doing beyond that general observation. This was nothing out of the ordinary. What was unusual, though, was a large dappled grey horse trotting along the shoreline towards them. Horses weren't exactly an unusual sight themselves out in a rural town, but they were usually in their fields or accompanied by a rider. There was no one else in sight, and this horse had no saddle, bridle, or any sort of riding gear, actually. There are no true wild horses in the UK, and the only semi-wild horses make their home in the New Forest, somewhere right at the other side of the country. That left the option of it having somehow gotten out of its field. For all it seemed weird to me, in hindsight it wasn't all that unusual. Tourists were always crossing through private land and leaving gates open. Animals were bound to get out on an occasion. The kids took immediate notice of the animal, looking up from their chatter and letting out delighted squeals I could hear from even my spot up in the tree. I watched as they ran up to it, fearless as all children were, oblivious to the fact that if they spooked it, one kick from its front or back legs could shatter up their developing bones. I watched as the pair gleefully pet the animal. The horse itself didn't seem to mind the attention, which led me to think it was one frequently used for riding. Most likely one of the horses rented out to those tourists so they could enjoy a ride through the countryside. The horse lowered its head, allowing one of the kids to press a hand to its muzzle. I could hear the delighted laughter as the pair took turns alternating between stroking its flank and head. It was pretty cute, I have to admit. There's always something magical about an unfamiliar animal bringing content with your presence. With how calm this horse seemed to be, I didn't bat an eye as it lowered itself to the ground. The pair of kids seemed ecstatic about this, climbing onto the animal's back. Not exactly safe or smart, but kids don't really think like that, and I'm sure the horse would have made it very clear it didn't want them clambering all over them if they wanted to. He's a pretty damn big horse. It took me a few moments to realize that the children were no longer letting out happy squeals and giggles. They were screaming. I couldn't understand why at first, but as my vision focused more on the horse, I knew. How I hadn't noticed the change, I don't know. But where it had once been dappled gray, it was now black. The kind of black that seems to absorb all light around it, distorting it almost. It seemed to be dripping wet. Even from my spot in the tree, I could see the tangled mess of its waterlogged mane and tail leaking water onto the ground. Its eyes were the worst of it. I shouldn't have been able to see them clearly from such a distance. But even in the dull spring sun, I could see the glowing from these sickening, milky eyes. It threw its head back, rising to its feet with the children still on its back. They were trying to get off, but they couldn't. I don't know how, and I'm sure they didn't know how either. But no matter how much they struggled or screamed, they couldn't get off that horse. It was like they were superglued to it. I couldn't move from my spot, no matter how much my mind screamed at me to jump down and do something, anything. I'm ashamed to admit fear consumed me. Sweat dripped down my brow as my breathing grew more rapid by the second. My heart was beating so hard and fast that it hurt. I have no proper words to describe the primal terror that gripped me. The same terror I imagined gripped by our ancestors was confronted by a giant cave bear, or even an angry mammoth. Though where their fight or flight instinct would kick in, mine didn't. I was simply frozen. Frozen, as the beast charged towards the water, screaming children on its back, their cries not silenced until their heads dipped under the water, water that frothed and bubbled as they struggled beneath the surface. And nothing. Just an eerie stillness on that spring morning. Not even the birds sang. A part of me think they knew. Animals just know these things. I didn't know how long I sat up in that tree just for staring out over the water where that horse had vanished into the murk. I don't know what became of those kids, but I know they were never found and that they never will be. It was written off as an accidental drowning. Their parents beat themselves up over it as any parent would. Nothing like this had ever happened before in our little community. Kids who grew up around the lake pretty much knew how to swim by the time they could walk, and they knew how to be careful in the water. It didn't add up, of course, but beyond that, no one could explain it. I think the parents cling to the hope that their children simply ran away or were kidnapped, so that they may one day find them again. And I can't blame them for that. As for me, I never told anyone what I saw. No one would have believed me anyway. Save for a few ancient crones nobody took seriously, who frequently babbled about ghosts and ghouls. It haunts me that I did nothing. That I simply watched as those innocent children were put into a watery grave. I never went into the lake after that. To anyone that asked, I simply said that I didn't like the way the smell of the lake water clung to me. I didn't think I'd ever tell this story. But I still live in this town for over a decade later. And last night, I saw a dapple gray horse stalking along the lakeside. Doppelganger is a German word that literally means double goer. Legend has it that if you see your doppelganger, you will die. There are many true instances where this has occurred. For example, in 1860, right after winning the presidential election, Abraham Lincoln had a vision of his doppelganger. It happened while he was laying on his lounge in his bedchamber. Lincoln could see his full reflection in the mirror on his bureau, only there was something odd about it. It looked like he had two distinct faces, about 3 inches apart. When he stood up, the illusion melted away, and when he lay back down, he saw it again. Lincoln also noticed that one of the faces was paler than almost the other, ghostly pale. He went on with the excitement of the day, almost forgetting about the vision in the mirror. He was still a bit troubled by what he saw, so he decided to tell his wife. A few days later, he was able to see the image again, but after that, he was never able to see it. It wasn't for lack of trying, because Lincoln even tried to recreate the doubling effect for his wife to see, but he was unsuccessful. Mary Lincoln was extremely worried about the image and thought it was an omen that he would be elected a second time, but would not live through the second term. There's blood on my hands, but it's fine. I'm fine. I am not hurt. No one knows I was here tonight. No one saw me come in except for my prime, and he won't be telling anyone. Now he doesn't have a voice. I feel giddy. My feelings are overpowering me. These feelings are driving me insane. Where I'm from, we don't even know how to feel. I don't even think the people there are aware of their own existence. Why should we? When our primes are making all the decisions for us. My prime, the man I killed, was the opposite. He has a wife, friends, family, freedom. He decided where we should go and what we should do, but not anymore. Now my prime is lying lifeless on a fine oriental rug. Blood is forming a dark circle around his body. I have the same rug where I'm from, only the pattern is reversed. I look around the room. It seems familiar and yet strange. I've been in this room many times, but not in this one. The brown leather couch, the glass coffee table, the matching end tables, they were all the same, and yet so different. Where I'm from, everything is reversed, and we all follow whatever our prime decides to do. Our primes are our masters on the other side of the barrier. The barrier is what separates me from my prime's world. If my prime looks into a pool or a spoon or any other reflective surface, I will be there looking back at him, mindlessly doing whatever he does. Everyone on my side is a slave to their prime's will. I remember when I was born. My prime was reflected in the camera's lens. I was being held by my prime's mother, only it wasn't his mother. It was her puppet, and I was his puppet, only I didn't realize it at the time. My prime's mother kissed him and loved him because he was her baby. I was kissed only because that is what the puppet was told to do. The camera flashed, stealing a bit of my prime's soul and giving it to me. It was at that moment when I was not like the rest of the people in my world who followed whatever the primes did without question or objection. I was different. At that moment, I was aware of myself. When we were young, my prime was fascinated with me and I with him. We would look at each other with wide-eyed wonder. At that time, we were equals, and neither of us really knowing who was prime. As we grew older, though, it was clear that he was in control. I was fine with it at first. I loved my prime and I would do anything for him. Sometimes he would talk to me and ask the questions. I wanted to answer him, but I couldn't, as I had no voice to speak with. I wanted to connect with him and tell him what I thought about the world and the journey we were taking. I wanted to answer for myself. I wanted to let him know I was alive, that I loved him. Perhaps I thought he loved me as well. Slowly, though, over the years, I started to realize that my prime didn't see me as an equal. He didn't seem to think I was alive at all. My prime took me for granted. He would make me do foolish and bizarre things, things he wouldn't dare show the rest of the world. He used me for his own amusement. It didn't matter what I wanted, because he controlled me. He would even look with me with such disdain sometimes. I wondered why he would look at me like I didn't do anything except for follow him. 5 years ago, my prime met a beautiful woman with long curly hair. She made us smile every day. We laughed at her jokes and spent a lot of time with her. My prime fell in love, and so did I. The happiest day of my life was when my prime decided he wanted to marry her. He told me first, too. He practiced saying the words in front of me. I wish that I could have been the one to ask her. I wanted to switch places with my prime, just once, but I couldn't, so I just followed him. She said yes, and we were soon married in the spring. The wedding was beautiful. I pretended that I was the one saying the vows, although I would have said them differently if I could. One night, my prime and his wife lay in bed sleeping. This was always my favorite part of the day. My prime turned over and faced away from her. I wondered why he did that. I loved the wife with all my heart, and I wanted to see her face. My prime was fast asleep, and the connection between us was weak. So I did something I thought was impossible. I gathered my strength, hardened my resolve, and turned over. I looked the wife in the face with my own eyes and with my own free will for the first time in my life. My heart leaped. Her soft hair curled in long locks around her sleeping face. Her body moved up and down at a slow, constant pace. I looked into her face and kissed her on the forehead. I truly loved her. No, it wasn't her. It was her prime that I loved. I turned away from the lifeless doll next to me and went back to following my prime. My true love was on the other side of the barrier. After that, every day was torture. Every kiss which I used to cherish so much was a dagger plunged into my heart. I was jealous of my prime. I loved her more. There was no way anyone could love her as much as I did. And yet he gets to be with her, and I was stuck behind the barrier with her puppet. I had to break free. I had to break my connection with my prime completely and cross the barrier that kept me away from my love. I couldn't live in this world as a slave to my prime any longer. I had to be free. I waited and observed the barrier that kept our worlds apart. There were certain times and places where it was thinner than others, when the reflective surface was dark like an ATV screen. or when the reflective surface was foggy, or like the bathroom mirror. It looked more like a shadow than I did my prime, and the connection was weakened. When my prime was sleepy or intoxicated, he held less power over me, and I knew I could use this to my advantage. I practiced moving on my own at night, and I was eventually able to move around freely whenever I wanted. All my prime would see was a shadow that passed in the corner of his eye. Of course, when he looked back directly, the connection was strengthened again, and I was slave to his will. Finally, my chance to leave my prison came when my prime's wife bought a full-length antique mirror. She didn't know it, but the mirror was coated in mercury, a poisonous and magical element. She hung in the living room. Because of the strange qualities in the mercury, the barrier between worlds was so thin, all I needed was for my prime to look away, and I knew I would be able to cross. I had already planned out the exact time to escape. Sometimes in the middle of the night, my prime took me through the living room and into the kitchen. Never turned on the lights and never woke his wife. I would make the switch and throw him across the barrier to be my puppet, so I could be the prime. I was ever ready for the night when he would sleepily pass the antique mirror and we would trade places forever. Tonight, it finally happened. On this cold December night, my prime woke from his slumber. He put on his robe and left the bedroom. Anticipation rose in my stomach as he led me down the stairs and into the living room. He passed the mirror, and I easily broke through. I leaped out of the old mirror and landed safely on the other side. My prime didn't notice me at all. I grabbed him from behind and pushed him into the mirror. It didn't work. Instead, the mirror broke into pieces and my prime cut his head on the glass. He cut his pain and screamed, and I felt the injury from my head, too. I checked my head. Normally, I would be bleeding, but not this time. I smiled. I was uninjured, but our connection was so strong I still felt my prime's pain. My prime tried to pull himself up from the floor. I had felt the mirror pulling me back in. I panicked. I didn't mean to hurt him. I honestly was not my intent. If he looked at me directly, I knew I would be a reflection again. I wasn't thinking. I just wanted my freedom. I took one of the rear glass shards in my hand. I couldn't go back inside the mirror. Not once I had my freedom. I used my hand to cover his mouth. His face was hot and blood steamed down his forehead. I cut open his throat with the mirror. He made a gurgling noise and the blood gushed from his neck. He fell in a heap on the oriental rug. Now he's laying here on the floor dead, and my hands are covered with his blood. I look at his lifeless eyes and laugh like a madman. I just wanted my freedom at any cost. But now that it's time to pay, I don't know if I can. All my life I have depended on my prime to make all my decisions. He was always there, even when I hated him, when I wanted to be free of him and tried so hard to break our connection, and he was still in my life. What about my love, his wife? Would she really accept me as him? And if she did, would she still only love me because she loved him? I know now why we don't cross to the other side. The doppelganger cannot survive on the other side of the barrier. Even when they are dead, our primes will still control us. I laugh even harder this time. It feels so good to have a voice. I feel myself slipping into a giddy madness. The overwhelming burden of freedom strikes me hard. I have never really had the chance to decide anything for myself. I've never had to pull myself up, calm myself down, or build anything with my own hands. My hand. In my hand is the shard of mirror I used to end my prime's life. I should kill myself so my prime and I are the same. We need to be the same. The same. Same.